I think as we begin this 2025-2026 ministry year, I think it's important to consider the meaning of connection and care in the church community. As I sort of, thought through this summer as we did a bunch of thinking and planning and preparing for this new year, I really started to think that connecting to one another is actually the power that the gospel holds in some way. The world feels overwhelming, and when I talk to so many of you, even before church I talked to several of you, the world seems a daunting place, right? We hear about school shootings, we hear about all the things going on, maybe even coming to Chicago, right, in the next few weeks from this administration. It just feels like, am I the only one that feels sort of overwhelmed? Like, what do I do, right? So much going on in the world. And then we're also just trying to wake up and live each day and get through each day, right, at the same time. And so I think what I wanted to kind of, for us to unpack in the next few weeks is really what it means for us to be Christians in the midst of community. That we are not here necessarily to save the entire world, but we are here to save the little world that we've been given in many ways. And I think there's something that about us, like, to remember that we are not here, we can't do everything, but we can sort of do something, right? And after all, God didn't send down theology to save the world, right? What did God send to save the world? His son, like a person, right? Jesus didn't roam around telling people what to do from this holy, lofty place, right? Jesus could have just said, you do the thing, like Oprah, right? You get a car, you get salvation, you know the right thing. Here's the right theology. But what did Jesus do? He found a bunch of 12 dudes and kind of gave them what they needed in order to keep this thing going, right? He did it through relationship. He carried the message through relationships. And even today, as we're reading a book that is the theology of God, that we understand it, our Bible, and yet it's written from a human being to another human being in a letter form, right? Everything is about relationship. Everything is about relationship. And so I thought it would be helpful for us to unpack some of what that looks like for us today. People rarely preach on Philemon, and I find that to be a bit of a bummer. I did one of my Greek studies on the book of Philemon in seminary. It's often read and studied in conjunction with the book of Colossians, as I said. Same community, but a really different kind of take on that community. But I think the main message of this book, thank you for reading it, Dorothy. Dorothy almost read the entire thing, but I cut it down, you're welcome. But really a few more sentences and the book is done, and that's it. It's one chapter. But the main message of it, I think, is this. So the gospel of Jesus transforms relationships through connection and care. That's what it means. And the relationships in it that we need to unpack a little bit to understand it are the three kind of main players. We get other names, but the main names we get are Paul, Philemon, and Onesimus. And so, of course, first Paul, you all probably know Paul, right? Wrote a lot of the New Testament. You know maybe his story from Acts, where he was someone who was, through violent legalism, terrorized the early church. And then he had a dramatically transformative moment on the Damascus Road, where he went from Saul, the one who actually martyred the first Christian, to Paul, someone who gave his life for Christ. Again, he went from being a persecutor to a preacher, from an enemy of a gospel to its main defender. And there's something really beautiful whenever we hear from Paul. Paul is extreme, and so we have to unpack his words sometimes very carefully. In this letter, he is writing from jail. And jail is a little bit of a different kind of beast in the ancient world. Paul had a lot of friends and people that loved him and family. But when you were in jail, or as he was in house arrest, it means he just couldn't work. And so, as you can imagine, you would need someone to bring you food. You'd need someone to bring you things, right? And so he's talking about all these relationships he's developed, and these people are sort of helping him out during his incarceration. He was able to receive visitors, and one of the visitors he receives is someone named Onesimus, which we find out about. And this is a man running from his past, from the city of Colossae, and has met Paul in Rome. So this is the second person in this relationship triad. We know of Onesimus from, again, this time. There's a couple other places he's mentioned. We believe he was either a slave or someone who was at least, in the very least, estranged from his family. Either he had stolen or mismanaged funds, or either as he'd run away as an indentured servant, he'd caused some harm. During his time of knowing Paul, Onesimus becomes a Christian, and that's how we meet him in this letter. Paul became his mentor and a friend. That's why he says, like, he's like a child to me, like he's a father figure for him. So we kind of assume Onesimus was a little on the younger side. He's probably trying to figure out his life. He's wanting to do the right thing, but he doesn't quite know how to do the right thing. The right thing is complicated in the sense of indentured servitude in the ancient world. And Paul knew Philemon, the one who Onesimus had left and run away and wronged. And so this is actually the primary reason for the letter. So this is one of the few post-it notes or letters we get that's very sort of complicated but uncomplicated, right? This is a letter from one person to another talking about a third person saying, this is what I want you to do on my behalf. And so we have Philemon. So Philemon is converted to the faith of Jesus by Paul. He's a leader in the new church of Colossae. He's the one wronged by Philemon, or Philemon ran away from him. Paul appeals to him in a persuasive way so that Philemon, of his own volition, would let love and forgiveness direct his actions. Paul calls Philemon his brother and encourages him to see all the community as brothers and sisters, even Onesimus. Now, I know that sometimes we mention things like slavery, and in the context of the ancient world, everything was a little bit different. There was a sense of indentured servanthood at that time, and so he probably owed Philemon money or owed him something and had to work that off. And so when he left, however reason he left, whether a strange brother or an indentured servant, he had left Philemon in quite a pickle. And that's sort of what we're supposed to understand by this. So I like this letter, or this post-it. It centers on, again, these tough relationships, Paul believing there is a possibility of transformation and love and even restoration. But notice how Paul goes about encouraging this Christ-like behavior. This is one of the things I actually really love about this little letter, is that Paul is a little snarky at times, but he doesn't abuse his power relationship. He doesn't say, so, Philemon, you owe your whole life to me. I saved you. Remember that moment where I saved you? And now you're the leader of the church and you owe all this to me. So now you have to do this, right? He doesn't do that. He doesn't demand anything. He doesn't demand from power, a place of power. He doesn't do anything but attempt to like playfully persuade him to take this person back. Paul shows us in this moment how authority actually works when we are people with power as Christians. Right? This is how authority works. Paul doesn't coerce or force or misuse his power. He doesn't call him names. He doesn't say, you have to do this, you must do this. Paul wants certain behavior, but he realizes that he cannot control or make these two adults do anything that they don't want to do. Can I get an amen? Sometimes we think that we can make two adults do things. We can't. As a pastor, trust me, I know, right? We can't. But we can persuade, we can cajole, we can say, gosh, this would be so good if you did this. Paul knows that their behavior is their responsibility, and his own peace of mind is his own responsibility. Paul instead reminds them of their relationships. He forms it again in the sense of relationship. So notice that Paul is an authority in this church in Colossae. He's writing to a leader of the church of Colossae who's been wronged about this third person who's wronged him. And notice what he does with the language. He calls them brothers. He calls them beloved. He calls them family. He says, you do this for me out of love. And ultimately, this is why I personally cannot get behind what I see a lot of in Christian nationalism in the world today. I see nothing in the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, that shows me the way to share my faith with others is through violence or vitriol or power grabs or coercion. Right? I see nothing good happening when we make any religion, even Christianity, some sort of law that oversees and supersedes everything. Or if we did, we would certainly treat our immigrant neighbors differently, wouldn't we? If we actually said that we are Christians and we want some laws that make sense. We would see reconciliation with folks, not sending them or hoping that ICE will come to get them. We would want to be reconciled to them. We would, as Paul does, call whoever it is, whether it's a runaway slave, a strange brother, a leader of a church. Notice all three of those types of people are called what? Brother, father, beloved, friend, family, right? That's what's happening here. And if we wanted Christianity to be the law of the land, we would meet the needs of those who are struggling, not incarcerate them for profit. We would see those who are transgender, who are just trying to live each day. We wouldn't seek to destroy them. We would do something about school shootings, which I know is a frustrating thing that we're talking about again these days. We would love and care for the children and understand their fears. We wouldn't treat others worse than we would treat ourselves if we really wanted Christianity to be the law of the land. And again, I've said this before, I know this is a scary time for so many, a divisive time, a painful time. And it can feel so overwhelming, right? Like what to do. Like even today, like I'm preaching a sermon. Does it matter? Does it make a difference? Is it impactful? Is it helpful, right? So I decided to end this sermon in a little bit of an unusual way with a call for you. I want you to think about the zones of influence in your life. That's one of the things that I talked about with my two clergy pastor friends who are at much more progressive churches than I'm at. They are doing lots of work and lots of advocacy and things. But even they are realizing how easy it is to burn out, right? We want to save everyone. We want to do everything, but we can't. So we need to think about our zones of influence. We can't influence the entire world for the better, but from where each of us lives and work, there are ways that we can make a difference. We can start small. Starting next week, we are going to have some yard signs for you to put out. We're going to give them to you. We want a donation of $10. You don't have to if you don't have it. But it's basically just a sign that says, "Make America kind again," right? Put it out in your lawn. That may be what you do to say, this is a different world. I want a different world. I want a different world, and I am willing to do something about it. And then after church on the 21st, if you want to stay, we're going to talk about some ways in which we can do advocacy from here. What does it mean for us to be the kinds of people that stand up for others? We're going to figure it out together. I can't be at everything. You all can't be at everything. But maybe we can be at some things together, right? I don't know about you, but again, I'm often overwhelmed. Sometimes I open up social media and there are so many cats to save. Just that, right? Like so many cats to save, so many pets to save, like so many horrible images from around the world that are like in my feed all the time. Sometimes I feel like I just shut down, right? I internalize all of this pain in the world. And so what I noticed about this week's reading of this text and what I find super helpful about Paul, the letter that Paul writes, is that if Onesimus was a runaway slave, as we think he was, notice that Paul doesn't expect Philemon to do everything. He doesn't say, deal with all of the horrors of what's going on in the world. No, he writes a letter to him about this one person that he can reconcile with, care for, show up for, that he can serve. Paul doesn't expect a church or any church to solve every problem, but he expects them to solve the ones they have. Can I get an amen? Like, Paul doesn't expect churches to solve all the problems of the world. But if in your midst you have unreconciled emotions and thoughts and unforgiveness with one another, that's something that you can solve and deal with. Heal these relationships. Give freedom to this one person. Or if they're strange brothers, give comfort, care, and reconciliation, right? I think social media and how small our world has gotten is both amazing, right? Right now, I can find out somewhere around the world something's happening, and that's amazing, right? I'm in, Central Time Zone, Chicagoland area, and I can find out right now something's happening in Nairobi, and that's amazing. But it's also overwhelming, right? It's also a lot. And I'm not sure we're equipped as humans to handle the onslaught of what we see happening in the world. And again, I'm not meant to solve every problem that I see in the world. And if we really look, we're going to see a lot of problems, right? But I think we're meant to solve the problems where we can actually make a difference in this moment, in this present space, with these present people, with community. And so today I want to challenge you. Again, I'm going to end it this way. maybe make you a little uncomfortable. Everyone's like, uh-oh. You're not going to be forced to do anything. When the service is over, when we end it all up, I want to challenge you to stay in the worship space for just a few minutes. And I want to challenge you to do this. I want you to go up to someone maybe you don't know very well. So maybe you've seen them at worship, but you don't know their story. Like, you don't know their past, you don't know what their family's like, you don't know if they've gone through struggles. And again, we have some new folks, so don't just run at them if they stay, right? You know. I want you to look around and find someone, maybe you don't know their story, but you've been worshiping with them for a decade, right? But you don't know their story. You don't know them outside of planned church events. And again, you may have worshiped next to them for years, and maybe you just don't know anything about them. And after the service is over, I want you to check in with someone, to find someone to be sort of your partner for this week. Ask them how they're doing, maybe pray for them, and you can be as vulnerable as you want to be or as guarded as you need to be. But I want you to check in, and maybe if you're so bold, no pressure, you can share an email or a text or whatever and check in this week so that you have someone that next week you look forward to seeing back here again. But then you know a little bit more about them. Now, I know that for some people, you're having a little panic attack inside, and it's a mini, like, you know, some people are introverts or this is not their thing. Then go get coffee immediately after service. There's no pressure to stay. But I want to invite you that if you're someone who is serious this year about doing some little things in the world to make the world a better and kinder place, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with each other, right? And so I'd love for you to stay, find someone you don't know very well, make sure you know their name, make sure you have a way to connect with them, or at the very least say, I'll see you next week at church and I want to hear about how that happened. Hear about what's going on. And that's all. Is that pretty easy? Right? And again, you don't have to stay. I'm going to see people running out of here, and that's totally okay. Totally okay. Introverts never have fear for me of being judged. Of course, you know I'm not an introvert, but no fear of judgment. But I guess for me, what I would love for us to do and think about as we think about this ministry year, this year coming up, meaning like school year time, is that we don't get so overwhelmed with the problems of the world that we shut down. That we actually instead look to one another and say, how can I make your world a little better this week? Like, what can I do? What do you need this week from me? Do you need me to pray for you? Do you need me to, do something? Maybe you're going to be so bold as that I need something or whatever. And I want us to really consider what it means for us to be a church and a community, to care about one another, to love one another, because I think if we read anything from the book of Philemon, we understand this, that if we're not willing to do the work within ourselves to reconcile to one another and love one another, call each other brother and sister and father and mother and parent and child, if we're not willing to do that in this community, we're not going to do it out there very well. And that's, I think, what some of the disconnect is, right? That we need to do it amongst ourselves. And I think another thing that we're going to talk through this year is that for those of us, especially our kids in youth group, who I know are very, very busy, we're going to start to have ways. So I want you all to think about if you don't have a youth or a child, we're going to start thinking of ways that we can actually support our youth, going to their games, like going to their concerts, right? Thinking about what that means for us to hold one another accountable and to love one another. Because if we can do it in this space, we can do it anywhere. And this is where I believe it starts. So I hope that you are here with me on this beautiful, beloved journey where we learn about connecting with God really means connecting well with one another in love and service and healing and forgiveness. So as we continue before we go into communion, let's hear the music.